The ballroom glittered with 1,000 lights. Champagne flowed freely, and the air buzzed with congratulations. Elena Voss, radiant in designer white, smiled up at her groom, Maxwell Burke. At the altar, they looked perfect. She with her cascading, dark hair and flawless makeup, he with his confident stance and tailored tuxedo. But at table 19, partially hidden behind a towering floral centerpiece, sat Olivia Burke. 7 years ago, she had been the one wearing Maxwell's ring until she vanished without a trace on the night she discovered her twin sister and husband together. Everyone had eventually presumed her dead. Everyone except Olivia herself. Now she watched, unnervingly calm, as her identical twin kissed the man who had once been her husband. What puzzled the few guests who noticed her wasn't just her unexpected presence. It was her expression. Olivia wasn't distraught or angry. She was smiling, a quiet, calculating smile that suggested she alone understood what this day truly represented. 7 years is a long time to disappear. A long time to plan, a long time to uncover truths that some had killed to keep buried. In her purse rested a small USB drive containing evidence that would shatter the perfect facade of this fairy tale wedding. Evidence of a betrayal far deeper than a simple affair. Evidence of why she had really disappeared that stormy night 7 years ago when the coastal road had claimed her car, but never her body. As Maxwell's eyes scanned the reception, his champagne, glass, frozen halfway to his lips, his gaze finally locked with Olivia's. The glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor, a sound that would soon mirror the breaking of his carefully constructed new life. Olivia's smile deepened. The countdown had begun. The string quartet played Pachelbel's canon. As Elena Voss floated down the aisle, her custom Givenchy gown trailing behind her like sea foam, Maxwell Burke stood at the altar, his eyes never leaving his bride. The wedding was the social event of the season in Shawcliffe, an exclusive coastal town where old money whispered through the corridors of shingled estates perched on rocky bluffs. "She looks just like her," whispered an elderly woman to her companion. "It's almost eerie." "Well, they were identical," came the hushed reply. "Such a tragedy about Olivia. To think it's been 7 years." In the back row, partially concealed by a pillar draped in white roses and eucalyptus, sat a woman in a simple navy dress. Her dark hair was styled differently, shorter with subtle caramel highlights, but her face was unmistakable to anyone who looked closely enough. Olivia Burke watched her twin sister marry her husband with an expression that betrayed nothing but serene interest. The ceremony proceeded without interruption. Vows were exchanged, rings slipped onto fingers. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," declared the officiant. Maxwell kissed Elena with practiced passion, and applause erupted throughout the St. Augustine chapel. Olivia didn't applaud. She simply observed, as though watching actors perform a play whose ending she already knew. At the reception, held at the prestigious Shawcliffe Ocean Club, Olivia chose table 19, assigned to distant business associates of Maxwell's who had sent their regrets. The table's location offered a perfect view of the head table, while remaining partially screened by an elaborate centerpiece of white orchids and blue hydrangeas. She sipped champagne slowly, watching Maxwell work the room. He'd aged well in 7 years. A touch of grey at his temples only added to his distinguished appearance. His investment firm, Burke Capital, had tripled in size since her disappearance. Elena, too, had flourished. Once merely Olivia's more outgoing twin, she had stepped fully into her sister's life, becoming the socialite wife Olivia had never quite managed to be. "Excuse me," a voice interrupted her observations. A waiter with a concerned expression stood beside her table. "I'm sorry, But this table is reserved for the Winslow party. Who couldn't attend? Olivia replied smoothly. I'm an old friend of the family. Elena suggested I sit here. She smiled with just enough warmth to seem genuine, but not enough to invite further conversation. The waiter hesitated, then nodded and moved on. Olivia returned to her surveillance. At the head table, Elena laughed at something Maxwell's best man said, throwing her head back in a gesture so familiar it made Olivia's chest tighten. They had shared everything growing up, clothes, friends, secrets, until Elena decided she wanted to share Olivia's husband too. Maxwell rose for his toast, champagne flute in hand. I'd like to thank everyone for being here today to celebrate our love, he began, his voice carrying across the ballroom. Life takes unexpected turns. 7 years ago, I thought I'd lost my chance at happiness. He paused, a practiced moment of respect for his presumed dead first wife. But fate had other plans. Fate, Olivia whispered to herself, taking another sip of champagne. Is that what we're calling it now? As Maxwell continued his speech, Olivia allowed her mind to drift back. 7 years ago, before the betrayal, before the storm, before the empty car found washed up on the rocks below Crescent Point, the first glimpse had been innocent enough. Elena's hand lingering too long on Maxwell's arm during a dinner party at their coastal home. Olivia had dismissed it as her sister's naturally affectionate nature. The second sign came when she returned early from a writers' conference in Boston to find them sharing whispers on the veranda, falling silent too quickly when she appeared. She remembered Elena's increasing presence in their home. I'm just keeping Max company while you're working on your novel, her twin would say, with that familiar smile, the one that now adorned the face of the bride at the head table. Applause jolted Olivia back to the present. Maxwell had finished his toast. Elena was now standing, radiant in her joy, thanking everyone for coming. And I know, Elena said, her voice catching with emotion that Olivia knew was genuine. Her sister had always been an emotional person, even when those emotions belonged rightfully to someone else. I know that Olivia would be happy for us. She would want Max to find love again. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Maxwell squeezed Elena's hand in support. Would I? Olivia whispered to her champagne. How convenient that must be to believe. The evening progressed through dinner and dancing. Olivia remained at her table, declining invitations to dance from a few men who hadn't recognized her. She was waiting for the perfect moment, not to cause a scene, but to set her plan in motion. That moment came when Elena stepped away to the ladies' room. Olivia rose gracefully and made her way toward Maxwell, who stood alone near the bar. 7 years of preparation steadied her nerves. 7 years of uncovering truths. 7 years of planning this very encounter. Congratulations are in order, she said softly as she approached him from behind. Maxwell stiffened at the sound of her voice. Slowly, he turned. His face, so composed and confident throughout the day, drained of color. The tumbler of whiskey in his hand trembled slightly. You look like you've seen a ghost, Max, Olivia said, her voice low enough that nearby guests couldn't hear. Although I suppose that's exactly what I am to you. Olivia. Her name left his lips as barely a whisper. This isn't possible. And yet, here I am. She smiled. The same enigmatic smile she'd worn throughout the ceremony. Don't worry, I'm not here to ruin your perfect day, just to deliver a message. Maxwell glanced anxiously toward the ladies' room. Olivia, you need to leave. We thought you were dead. There was an investigation. Your car, yes, my car went over the cliff that night. Very convenient timing, wasn't it? Right after I confronted you about the affair. His eyes darted around the room. This isn't the place to discuss this. No, she agreed, it isn't. That's why I've arranged a meeting. Tomorrow, the boathouse at Crescent Point, noon. I'm leaving for our honeymoon tomorrow. Olivia's smile didn't waver. No, you're not, because if you don't meet me, the information I've gathered goes directly to Detective James Harlow. Remember him? He never quite closed my case, you know. Always felt something was off about my disappearance. What information? Maxwell hissed, leaning closer. Everything, Max. I know everything. She stepped back as she spotted Elena emerging from the ladies' room. Noon tomorrow. Come alone. She turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd before Elena could spot her. As she exited the ballroom, Olivia heard the faint sound of breaking glass behind her, followed by concerned voices. She didn't look back. She had waited 7 years for this moment. She could wait one more day for the real confrontation to begin. In her hotel room overlooking the ocean, Olivia opened her laptop and checked that the files were ready. Tomorrow would be the first step in her carefully orchestrated return from the dead, and the beginning of the end for Maxwell and Elena Burke. 7 years earlier, on a night when thunder cracked like breaking bones over Shorecliff, Olivia Burke had discovered the truth. She hadn't been looking for evidence, quite the opposite. Olivia had been searching for comfort in her husband's study while he was supposedly working late. Her latest psychological thriller had received a scathing review, and despite her publisher's assurances that it wouldn't affect sales, Olivia felt the sting deeply. She'd wanted to surround herself with Maxwell's things, to feel closer to him. In his absence, that's when she found the text messages. In the quiet of her hotel room, the night of the wedding, Olivia allowed herself to remember that moment. How her world had imploded with each swipe of her finger across Maxwell's carelessly forgotten tablet. "Can't wait to see you tonight," Elena had written. "Max, I hate that we're hurting her, but what we have is real." "Soon," he had responded. "After her book release. It'll be easier then. She's already so distracted." Olivia had read every message, each one driving the knife deeper. 2 months of exchanges between her husband and her twin sister, planning rendezvous, sharing secrets, even discussing how and when to tell Olivia about them. That night, she had confronted Maxwell when he returned home, rain-soaked and smelling of Elena's distinctive perfume. The argument had been explosive, accusations, denials, then finally his confession. "It just happened, Liv," he had said, his handsome face twisting with what seemed like genuine regret. "We didn't plan this, but Elena and I, there's something between us that I can't ignore. My sister," Olivia had whispered, "my twin sister." What happened next remained blurry in her memory. Or at least, that's what she had told Detective Harlow during their video call 3 years ago when she finally reached out to someone from her past. The official story was simple. Distraught after learning of her husband's affair with her twin, Olivia had driven off in a storm. Her car was found the next morning at the bottom of the cliffs near Crescent Point. No body was ever recovered, but given the violent seas that night, authorities presumed she had drowned. The truth was considerably more complicated. Olivia checked. Her phone, 11:30 a.m., almost time for her meeting with Maxwell. She gathered the waterproof folder containing copies of the evidence she had accumulated and slipped it into her bag. The originals remained secure in multiple locations, insurance against any desperate measures Maxwell might take. The drive to Crescent Point took her along familiar coastal roads. Shorecliff hadn't changed much in 7 years. Still the same manicured lawns, fronting sprawling estates, the same exclusive shops lining Harbour Street, the same air of privilege and security. How easily that security could be shattered. Olivia knew this better than most. The boathouse sat at the end of a private dock, a weathered structure that had once belonged to Olivia and Maxwell's estate. After her death, Maxwell had sold the main house but kept the waterfront property, converting the boathouse into a weekend retreat. Elena had never liked it, another detail Olivia had gleaned from her investigations. Olivia parked on the narrow access road and walked the remaining distance. The smell of salt and seaweed intensified as she approached the water. Seagulls wheeled. Overhead, their cries sharp against the steady rhythm of waves against the shore. Maxwell was already there, pacing the dock. He wore casual clothes, expensive jeans, and a blue cashmere sweater that Olivia recognized as one she had given him for his birthday in another lifetime. He looked haggard in the unforgiving daylight, the confident groom of yesterday replaced by a man carrying the weight of long-buried secrets. He froze when he saw her approaching. "You came," Olivia remarked, stopping several feet away. "Did I have a choice?" His voice was hoarse. "Olivia, where have you been? 7 years. Everyone thought you were dead." "That was the point, Max." She gestured toward the boathouse. "Shall we? I'd prefer to have this conversation in private." Inside, the boathouse had been transformed from the rustic storage space she remembered into a stylish retreat. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the bay, while modern furniture and nautical accents created an atmosphere of casual luxury. "Elena has no idea you're here," Maxwell said, not as a question, but as confirmation of his own deception. "She thinks I'm meeting with clients who couldn't make the wedding." "Already lying to your new bride?" Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Some things never change." Maxwell's composure cracked. "What do you want, Olivia? Money. Is that why you've come?" "Back now. The statute of limitations on insurance fraud." "Insurance fraud." Olivia laughed, the sound brittle against the backdrop of waves. "Is that what you think this is about? The $2 million policy you so thoughtfully took out on me 6 months before my accident?" His face paled. "How did you know about that?" She removed a document from her folder and placed it on the coffee table between them. "I know everything, Max, including the fact that the policy was your idea, not our financial advisor's as you claimed. That doesn't prove anything." "No. What about this?" She produced another document, a series of emails between Maxwell and a man named Victor Reeves. "Your communications with a known associate of offshore banking specialists, discussing how to move funds discreetly, dated 3 weeks before my disappearance." Maxwell sank onto the sofa. "You've been investigating me." "For years." Olivia remained standing, maintaining the position of power. "Did you think I just drove off that cliff in despair? That I was so devastated by your affair with Elena that I killed myself? That would have been convenient for you, wouldn't it?" "We thought. I know what you thought. But here's what actually happened, Max." She paced slowly before the windows. "That night after our fight, I did drive toward Crescent Point. I needed space, time to think. But I saw something on my way, or rather someone. Elena's car parked at the lookout point, and yours right beside it." Maxwell's hands clenched into fists. "I pulled over, thinking maybe you were both there to find me, to apologize. But when I approached..." Olivia paused, the memory still sharp. "I heard you planning, not just how to continue your affair, but how to get me out of the picture permanently. You mentioned the insurance policy. You mentioned how Elena could step into my life if something happened to me, how no one would question it given our identical appearance." "That's not..." "Don't," Olivia cut him off sharply. "Don't lie to me again. I heard everything, and when I tried to confront you both, there was a struggle. I fell, or was pushed, down that embankment. You both thought I was dead, or at least badly injured. I heard Elena crying, and you telling her it was an accident, that no one would know." She touched her temple, where a thin scar remained hidden beneath her hair. "But I wasn't dead. I managed to crawl away while you were both panicking. I made it to the road where a passing tourist picked me up, a stroke of luck you couldn't have anticipated." "Olivia," Maxwell whispered, his face ashen, "we never meant..." "Never meant what? To kill me? To fake a car accident? To collect my life insurance and live happily ever after with everyone's sympathy?" Her voice remained controlled, despite the rage simmering beneath. Detective Harlow has been quite interested in the case file I've been building, especially the parts about the insurance policy and the suspicious timing of my accident. Maxwell stood abruptly. What do you want? Just tell me. Olivia smiled, the same enigmatic smile she had worn at the wedding. Justice, Max, but in terms, not the courts. I've waited 7 years for this moment. Tomorrow you and Elena will learn exactly what those terms are. The Seven Tides Hotel sat perched on the edge of Shorecliff's most dramatic cliffside, its glass-walled restaurant, offering sweeping views of the churning Atlantic. It was here, at a corner table partially screened by indoor palms, that Olivia had instructed Maxwell to bring Eleanor at precisely 1 p.m. Olivia arrived 30 minutes early, her heart maintaining the same steady rhythm it had developed over 7 years of patient planning. She wore a charcoal grey dress that subtly emphasized her slender frame, her hair swept into an elegant chignon. The maitre d' led her to her requested table without a flicker of recognition. She had changed enough that only those looking for Olivia Burke would find her in the composed woman who called herself Morgan Wells. At 12:58, Olivia spotted them, entering the restaurant. Maxwell first, his body language tense as a drawn bow, followed by Eleanor, whose confusion was evident even from a distance. He hadn't told her who they were meeting. That much was clear from her expression. The maître d' guided them toward Olivia's table. She watched Elena's face, savoring the moment when confusion transformed into shock, then disbelief, and finally a bone-deep fear that drained all color from her cheeks. "Hello, sister," Olivia said quietly as they reached her table. Elena swayed slightly. Maxwell steadied her with a hand at her elbow, but his own composure was barely intact. "This isn't possible," Elena whispered. "You're dead." "Evidently not." Olivia gestured to the chairs across from her. "Please, sit down. We have much to discuss." After a moment's hesitation, they complied. A waiter approached immediately, but Olivia waved him away with a polite smile. "We'll need a few minutes." When they were alone again, Eleanor found her voice. "Where have you been? All this time? How could you let us think you were dead? Us?" Olivia tilted her head. "How interesting that you consider yourselves the victims in this scenario." "Olivia," Maxwell interjected, "whatever you think happened that night." "I know what happened," she cut him off smoothly. "I've explained it to you already, Max. Or did you not share that conversation with your new bride?" She turned her gaze to Elena. "Did he tell you I was at your wedding? That we spoke? That I know about the insurance policy, the planning, the push that should have killed me?" Eleanor's eyes darted to Maxwell. "What is she talking about?" "She's delusional," Maxwell said quickly. "She's clearly been unwell since her disappearance." Olivia smiled. "Gaslighting, always your first line of defense." She removed a small recorder from her purse and placed it on the table. "Shall I play back our conversation from yesterday, the one where you didn't deny planning my convenient disappearance?" Maxwell's jaw tightened. Elena's hands trembled as she reached for the water glass in front of her. "I don't understand," Elena said, her voice small. "Max told me you drove off after you found out about us. That your car went over the cliff. There was an investigation, a remarkably cursory one," Olivia noted. "No one looked too deeply when a distraught woman apparently drove off a cliff after discovering her husband's affair with her twin sister. It fit a familiar pattern. Tragic, but not suspicious." She leaned forward slightly. "What the investigation missed was the fact that Max had recently increased my life insurance policy to $2 million, or that he had been researching undetectable poisons in the weeks leading up to my disappearance. Yes, I found those searches on your shared laptop, Max. Or that you both were at Crescent Point that night, despite telling police you were at home waiting for me to return." Elena's face had gone from pale to ashen, Max, what is she saying? Tell me this isn't true." Maxwell's silence spoke volumes. "The plan was elegant in its simplicity," Olivia continued, her voice as calm as if she were discussing the weather. "My unstable emotional state following the discovery of your affair would make suicide plausible. The storm provided perfect cover for any inconsistencies. And with an identical twin ready to step into my life, who would notice if some of my behavior seemed different afterward." "I never wanted to hurt you," Eleanor whispered. "I loved Max, but I loved you too. I never wanted you dead." "And yet," Olivia said coldly, "when I confronted you both at the lookout point and the struggle ensued, you did nothing when I fell. You watched me tumble down that rocky slope. You heard my head crack against stone. And instead of calling for help, you discussed how to make it look like I'd driven off the cliff in despair." Maxwell finally spoke. "It wasn't like that. We panicked. We thought you were dead already, and calling the police would only implicate you in my death," Olivia finished. "So instead, you drove my car to the cliff edge, put it in neutral and let it roll into the ocean. A tragic accident. Case closed." Elena was openly crying now. "I thought, all these years, I thought it was an accident, that you'd driven off." In the storm, Olivia studied her twin's face, searching for signs of deception. She found none. Only devastation, a cold realization dawned. "He didn't tell you," Olivia said slowly. "You actually believed I killed myself." Eleanor nodded through her tears. "Max said you were distraught, that you'd driven away and when they found your car the next day, while you were sedated in our guest room," Maxwell interjected quickly. "You were hysterical after Olivia left. I gave you a sleeping pill." The pieces clicked into place in Olivia's mind. "So Elena wasn't at the lookout point that night. It was just you, Max. You followed me. You were the one who pushed me when I confronted you about the insurance policy. You were the one who staged my accident." Maxwell's expression hardened. "You have no proof." "Actually," said a deep voice from behind them, "she has quite a lot of proof." Detective James Harlow stood beside their table, his weathered face impassive. Behind him were two uniformed officers. "Recording devices in public places are completely legal in this state," Harlow said, gesturing to Olivia's recorder. "And Miss Burke has been building quite a comprehensive case over the years." "James," Maxwell said, attempting a friendly tone, "this is clearly a domestic dispute. My presumed dead wife has returned with wild accusations, backed by financial records, witness statements, and forensic evidence from the original scene that we've re-examined," Harlow interrupted. "And now, your own recorded confession." Elena stared at Maxwell, as though seeing him for the first time. "You tried to kill my sister. For money." "For us," Maxwell hissed. "Everything I did was for us." Elena recoiled. "I never would have, if I had known." "Maxwell Burke," Harlow said formally, "you're under arrest for the attempted murder of Olivia Burke, insurance fraud, and obstruction of justice." As the officers moved forward to handcuff Maxwell, he lunged suddenly across the table toward Olivia. "You ruined everything," he snarled, his composed façade finally cracking completely. Detective Harlow intercepted him, wrestling him back with surprising strength for a man in his 50s. The restaurant had gone silent, other diners watching in shock as Maxwell was restrained and read his rights. As he was led away, Elena remained frozen in her seat, tears streaming down her face. "Olivia," she whispered, "I swear I didn't know. I would never have. Not to you. Not to my own sister." Olivia looked at her twin, her mirror image wrapped in designer clothes purchased with insurance money meant to compensate for her death. 7 years of hatred and planning for revenge suddenly felt hollow as she recognized genuine horror in Elena's eyes. "I believe you," Olivia said finally, "but that doesn't undo the betrayal. You may not have known about his plan to kill me, but you knew you were having an affair with my husband." Eleanor nodded, her shoulders slumping. "I have no excuse. I loved him, or I thought I did." She looked up, her tear-stained face a portrait of devastation. "What happens now?" Olivia considered the question. For 7 years, she had focused solely on exposing Maxwell's crimes, on reclaiming her life and identity. She had pictured Elena as a willing accomplice in her near death. Now, faced with her sister's genuine shock and grief, the future seemed suddenly unscripted. "Now," Olivia said, "we both start over." The aftermath of Maxwell's arrest exploded through Shawcliffe like a storm surge. News vans lined the manicured streets, reporters ambushed friends and associates, and social media erupted with theories and speculation. The tale was irresistible. The presumed dead wife returns at her twin sister's wedding to expose an attempted murder plot by her ex-husband. Olivia watched it unfold from the relative sanctuary of the Lighthouse Inn, a modest bed and breakfast on the outskirts of town. She had chosen it specifically for its obscurity. No one from their social circle would think to look for her there. 3 days after the arrest, Elena texted, "We need to talk, alone." Olivia agreed to meet at Blackrock Beach, a secluded stretch of shore accessible only by a steep hiking trail. Few tourists ventured there, and at sunset on a Tuesday in early autumn they would likely have the place to themselves. Elena was already there when Olivia arrived, sitting on a driftwood log, staring out at the darkening horizon. She looked smaller somehow, diminished without Maxwell's presence and the protective shell of their shared lie. "The police have been questioning me for hours each day," Elena said without preamble, as Olivia sat beside her, maintaining a careful distance. "They think I must have known something." "Did you?" Olivia asked, her voice neutral. Elena shook her head, tears already forming. "I knew we were wrong to fall in love. I knew betraying you was unforgivable. But murder—" She shuddered. "Never. I could never have been part of that. Then why did you believe so easily that I had killed myself? You knew me, Elena, better than anyone." Elena was silent for a long moment, watching the waves crash against the rocky shore. "Because I needed to believe it," she finally admitted. "The alternative, that you had simply disappeared, that you might return someday, was too terrifying to contemplate. And Max was so convincing. He said the police had evidence that you'd deliberately driven off the cliff. There was never any such evidence. I know that now." Elena wiped at her tears. "The detective showed me the original case file. They found no skid marks, nothing to indicate you'd tried to stop the car. They assumed you'd deliberately driven off, but there was never conclusive proof." Olivia nodded. "Harlow suspected something wasn't right from the beginning, but without a body, and with you both providing alibis for each other, he couldn't pursue it further." "I gave Max an alibi because he told me to," Elena whispered. "He said if people knew we were together that night, they would suspect us of causing your death somehow. I believed him because—" She paused. "Because part of me felt guilty, like our affair had killed you, even if indirectly." Olivia studied her twin's profile, searching for the girl who had shared her childhood, who had finished her sentences and bandaged her scrapes. They had been inseparable once, until college sent them on different paths, Olivia to study literature and pursue writing, Elena to explore the world of high fashion and design. "Where were you really that night?" Olivia asked. "At your house." "Our house. Max gave me a sleeping pill because I was hysterical after your confrontation with us. I remember you storming out, and then it gets foggy. I woke up the next morning to the news that your car had been found." Elena turned to face her. "Sister, where did you go, Olivia, all these years?" Olivia looked out at the darkening ocean. "After the fall, after I heard Max planning to stage my death, I managed to crawl to the road. A tourist couple found me, disoriented and bleeding. They took me to a hospital in the next county. I gave a false name. I was afraid, confused, and by the time my head cleared enough to think straight, the news was reporting that I was presumed dead. Why didn't you come forward then? Because I remembered what I'd heard. Max talking about making my death look like an accident, the insurance policy. I knew if I suddenly reappeared, I'd be in danger again, especially if I couldn't prove what he'd done. Olivia's voice hardened. So I decided to disappear for real, to become someone else, until I could gather enough evidence to expose him. 7 years, Elena murmured. You spent 7 years planning this? Not at first. Initially, I just wanted to survive. I moved across the country, used the cash I had in my wallet and the help of a women's shelter to establish a new identity. Morgan Wells was born. Olivia's expression softened slightly at the memory. She was a bookstore clerk in Arizona, then a library assistant in Oregon, eventually a freelance editor in Washington. When did you decide to come back? 3 years ago. I saw an article about Burke Capital's expansion. There was a photo of you and Max at some charity gala. You were wearing my grandmother's pearl earrings. Elena's hand instinctively went to her earlobe, though the earrings were absent today. He gave them to me. Said they were family heirlooms that should stay in the family. They were. My family's. Heirlooms. Olivia's voice remained steady. That was when I contacted Detective Harlow. I needed someone inside the system, someone who could access information I couldn't. And he believed you? Just like that? Not immediately. I had to prove I was really Olivia Burke. Then I had to convince him that I hadn't faked my death for insurance money. Once he verified my story, he agreed to help, quietly, unofficially at first. They sat in silence for a while, the rhythmic crash of waves filling the space between them. The sun had nearly disappeared beneath the horizon, painting the sky in deepening shades of purple and indigo. What happens now? Elena finally asked, echoing her question from the restaurant. Will you come back to Shawcliffe, reclaim your life? Olivia considered the question. Parts of it, perhaps. My name, certainly. My career as a writer. But Shawcliffe was never really home to me. It was a place I lived because Max wanted to. Be near his social circle. I've changed too much to slip back into that world. And us? Elena's voice cracked slightly. Is there any way forward for us? The question hung in the air between them, weighted with decades of shared history and years of betrayal. I don't know, Olivia admitted honestly. You slept with my husband, Elena. You stepped into my life after you thought I was dead. You wore my clothes, lived in my house, spent my insurance money. Even if you didn't know about Max's plan, you benefited from my supposed death in every possible way. Elena flinched but didn't deny it. I know, and I'll live with that guilt forever. She hesitated. The prosecutors want me to testify against Max. They said it would help their case if I could confirm his state of mind, his financial motivations. Will you do it? Yes, Elena said without hesitation. I owe you that much at least. As darkness settled fully around them, Olivia stood. We should go. The path is dangerous after dark. They walked in silence up the steep trail, the beam of Olivia's flashlight illuminating the way. At the top, their cars were parked side by side, Olivia's modest rental and Elena's luxury SUV, another stark illustration of the divergent paths. Their lives had taken. Before they parted, Elena reached out tentatively, not quite touching Olivia's arm. For what it's worth, I missed you every day. Even when I thought you were dead, I talked to you sometimes. Imagined what you would say. What did I say? In your imagination. Eleanor's smile was sad. You told me I was a fool. That Max wasn't worth what I'd given up to be with him. That someday it would all come crashing down. Olivia nodded. Sounds like me. She hesitated, then added, Detective Harlow will need your statement tomorrow. I'll be there too, going over some additional evidence. Maybe we can talk more afterward. I'd Like that, Elena said softly. As Olivia drove away, she realized that the knot of hatred and vengeance that had propelled her for 7 years was slowly beginning to unravel. The justice she had sought was in motion. Maxwell would pay for his crimes. But the future she had never allowed herself to imagine beyond this moment now stretched before her, uncertain and strangely full of possibility. The Shorecliff Police Station was a deceptively quaint building of red brick and white trim that belied the serious nature of the work conducted inside. Olivia sat in an interview room, a cup of cooling coffee on the table before her, as Detective Harlow reviewed her statement one final time. "This should be enough," he said, closing the folder. "Between your testimony, the financial records, and the recording from the restaurant, we've built a solid case against Maxwell." "And Elena?" Olivia asked. "What happens to her?" Harlow leaned back in his chair. "Based on everything we've found, she appears to have been unaware of the attempt on your life. Unless new evidence emerges, she'll likely face no charges related to that crime." "But," Olivia prompted, hearing the unspoken qualification in his tone, but he continued, "there may be questions about the insurance money. She benefited financially, even if she didn't know its true source." Olivia nodded slowly. "She'll probably have to return it, most likely." Harlow studied her face. "You've changed, Olivia. The woman who came to me 3 years ago was consumed by the need for justice, or perhaps revenge. Today I sense something different." "Perspective, maybe," she replied after a moment. 7 years is a long time to live with hate as your primary companion." A knock at the door interrupted them. Officer Chen, a young woman with a serious expression, stepped in. "Detective, Mrs. Burke, the other Mrs. Burke, is here for her statement." "Thank you. We're finished here for now," Harlow said, standing. "Olivia, you're free to go. We'll be in touch if we need anything else." As Olivia gathered her things, the door opened again, and Elena appeared in the doorway. The sisters froze, mirror images in their discomfort. Elena wore a simple navy dress, her hair pulled back in a severe ponytail, her face bare of makeup, as though she were deliberately stripping away the glamorous facade she had cultivated as Maxwell's wife. "I'll give you two a moment," Harlow said tactfully, ushering Officer Chen out and closing the door behind them. The sisters regarded each other across the small room. "I didn't expect to see you here," Elena said. "Harlow needed to review my statement." Olivia hesitated. "How are you holding up?" Elena gave a humorless laugh. "The media is camped outside my house. My phone won't stop ringing. Max's lawyers have frozen our joint accounts pending the investigation." She twisted the wedding ring she still wore. "And I'm about to testify against the man I married 2 weeks ago, so not great." For the first time, Olivia felt a flicker of sympathy for her twin. Elena had made terrible choices, but she was also a victim of Maxwell's manipulation. "Where are you staying?" "At the house, your house originally." Eleanor looked down. "Though I suppose I'll have to sell it now. It was purchased with my death benefits," Olivia finished. "Probably wise to sell, yes." An awkward silence fell between them, broken when Eleanor finally asked, "Why didn't you reveal yourself at the wedding? Why wait until the day after to confront Max?" Olivia considered the question. "I needed to see you both together, to observe how you interacted when you thought you were safe. And—" she paused. "I suppose I wanted to see if you were happy. If what you built on the ruins of my life was worth the cost, was it, from what you saw?" "No," Olivia said quietly. "You both seemed to be playing roles. There was no real joy there, just performance." Elena nodded slowly. "You always could see through people. Even as children, you knew when someone was lying, when they were hiding something." She met Olivia's gaze directly. "Is that why you knew Max would try to silence you permanently? Did you see it coming somehow?" The question struck Olivia with unexpected force. Had she known? Had some part of her sensed the depth of Maxwell's darkness, even before she found the texts, before she confronted him? "I think I always knew he was selfish," she said carefully. "But capable of murder? No. That shocked me as much as it seems." "To have shocked you?" Elena looked away. "The detectives showed me his search history from back then. Undetectable poisons, staged suicides, insurance investigation procedures." Her voice shook slightly. "He was planning it for weeks while sleeping beside me, telling me he loved me, promising we would be together once you understood and accepted the situation. He was never going to give me the chance to understand or accept anything," Olivia said. "I was worth more to him dead than divorced." $2 million more, Elena whispered. "God, how could I have been so blind?" The door opened and Detective Harlow reappeared. "Sorry to interrupt, but we need to take Mrs. Burke's statement now." Elena nodded and moved toward the chair. Olivia had vacated. As they passed each other, Elena impulsively reached out and caught Olivia's hand. "Will you wait? After my statement, I'd like to show you something." Curiosity won out over Olivia's instinct to maintain distance. "I'll wait." 90 minutes later, they drove in separate cars to the Burke estate, a sprawling contemporary home on 3 acres overlooking the ocean. Elena led Olivia to a detached structure that had once been the property's carriage house. "I converted it into my design studio," Elena explained as she unlocked the door. "Max never came out here. Said he had no interest in fashion nonsense." Inside, the space was flooded with natural light from skylights and tall windows. Drafting tables, fabric samples, and dress forms occupied most of the room. But it was the wall at the far end that captured Olivia's attention. It was covered with pages, manuscript pages. Her manuscript pages. "What is this?" Olivia asked, approaching the wall slowly. "Your last novel, the one you were working on before." Eleanor trailed off. "After you were gone, I found the manuscript in your writing room. It was unfinished. The publisher wanted to release it posthumously, but I couldn't bear the thought of your story remaining incomplete." Olivia scanned the pages, recognizing her own words interspersed with new passages. "You finished it?" Elena nodded. "I spent months studying your style, your narrative patterns. I read everything you'd ever written. I tried to become you in a way to honor your voice. You published it under my name? As a final work. Critics called it your masterpiece." Elena's voice held no pride, only a deep sadness. "I didn't do it for money or recognition. Your name remained on it, not mine. I just couldn't let your story go untold." Olivia approached the wall, running her fingers over the pages. Some were typed, others handwritten, her handwriting so perfectly mimicked that she could scarcely tell the difference. "You were always the better writer," Eleanor said softly. "Even when we were girls, your stories were always more vivid, more real." "And you were always the better artist," Olivia replied. "Your drawings, your sense of color and design." Another silence fell between them, but this one felt different, charged with memories of a shared childhood, of a time before betrayal and deception had severed their bond. "I have something else to show you," Elena said finally, moving to a cabinet in the corner. She returned with a leather-bound journal. "I started writing to you after you disappeared. Every day at first, then weekly as time passed. I never stopped." She handed the journal to Olivia, who opened it carefully. "Dear Liv," the first entry began, "They found your car today. Not you, just the car. I keep thinking you'll call, that this is some terrible mistake." Olivia closed the journal, unable to read. "More. I can't, not right now." "I understand. Keep it. Read it when you're ready." Elena wrapped her arms around herself. "I know it doesn't excuse anything, but I want you to know that I never stopped loving you, even while betraying you in the worst possible way." Olivia slipped the journal into her bag, her emotions too complex to untangle in this moment. I should go. Of course. Eleanor walked her to the door. Olivia, what will you do now? After the trial, I mean? I'm not sure, Olivia admitted. Resume my career, perhaps. Under my real name this time. Beyond that, she shrugged. I've been focused on the past for so long, I haven't given much thought to the future. As she turned to leave, Elena spoke once more. If you read the journal, when you read it, you'll understand something I've only recently admitted to myself. Max never loved either of us. He loved what we represented, what we could give him. For you, it was literary success and social connections. For me, I was just the convenient replacement when you became inconvenient. Olivia nodded slowly. I think I already knew that. She hesitated at the threshold. Take care of yourself, Elena. You too, Liv. Driving away from the estate, Olivia felt lighter somehow, as though she had set down a burden she'd carried for too long. The journal sat on the passenger seat beside her, a bridge between past and present, between the sisters they had been and the strangers they had become. Justice would be served. Maxwell would face the consequences of his actions, but beyond that lay the harder, more complex work of healing, not just herself, but perhaps someday the bond that had once seemed unbreakable. 3 weeks later, Maxwell Burke sat in the county courthouse as the judge denied his bail for the 3rd time. The defendant poses a significant flight risk, Judge Montoya declared, and the evidence suggests a calculated, premeditated attempt to commit murder for financial gain. Olivia watched from the back of the courtroom, her presence unobtrusive. She had attended every hearing, a silent witness to the disintegration of Maxwell's carefully crafted façade. Today, he looked nothing like the confident investment manager who had once commanded rooms with his presence. His designer suits had been replaced by standard-issue clothing from the detention center, his once perfect hair now dulled and unkempt. Elena sat on the opposite side of the courtroom, called as a witness for the prosecution. The sisters acknowledged each other with slight nods, but maintained their distance in public. The media frenzy surrounding the case meant their every interaction was scrutinized, each gesture analyzed for signs of reconciliation or lingering animosity. After the hearing, Olivia slipped out a side entrance to avoid the press corps camped on the courthouse steps. She drove to Mariner's Cafe, a small establishment overlooking the harbor, where she had arranged to meet Catherine Winters, her former literary agent. Catherine was already waiting at a corner table, an elegant woman in her 60s, with silver-streaked, dark hair and keen eyes that missed nothing. She rose as Olivia approached, embracing her with genuine emotion. "My God, it really is you," Catherine said, pulling back to study Olivia's face. "When you called, I thought it might be some cruel prank." "It's really me," Olivia confirmed as they sat. "Thank you for agreeing to meet privately before making any public statements." Of course. Catherine's professional composure returned. As she signaled for the waiter, after ordering coffee, she leaned forward. "I have 1,000 questions, but I'll start with the most pressing. Are you planning to write again?" Olivia smiled. Some things never changed. Catherine had always focused on the work above all else. "Yes, I am. In fact, I've been writing throughout my absence, under a different name, of course. Published work. 3 novels, small presses, modest sales, nothing like my previous success, but enough to sustain me." Catherine's eyes widened with interest. "Under what name?" Morgan Wells. Recognition flickered across Catherine's face. "The psychological thrillers? The Shadow Year? Beneath Still Waters?" Olivia nodded. "I read Beneath Still Waters last summer. I remember thinking the voice was reminiscent of yours, the psychological insight, the precise language." Catherine shook her head in wonder. "I never imagined Well, this changes everything. We can position your return as the literary event of the year. I'd rather not commercialize my trauma, Olivia said quietly. What happened to me isn't a marketing angle. Catherine had the grace to look abashed. Of course, forgive me, professional instinct, but the literary world will want to know where you've been, what you've experienced. And they will, through my work. I'm writing a new novel, my first as Olivia Burke in 7 years. Their coffee arrived, providing a momentary pause in the conversation. When the waiter departed, Catherine asked carefully, "And what about the vanishing hour? The novel Elena completed after your disappearance?" Olivia sipped her coffee before answering. "I've read it. The entire book, not just the wall of pages in her studio. It's remarkable how well she captured my voice." "It was uncanny," Catherine agreed. "Many critics believed it was your finest work. The irony is almost too perfect. Your fictional exploration of betrayal and false identities, published after your presumed death. Written partly by the woman who betrayed me," Olivia added. "Yes, the irony isn't lost on me. There will be questions about its authorship now. Legal questions, potentially. I know. I'm still deciding how to handle that." Catherine studied. Her former client with professional assessment. The memoir offers would be substantial, 7-figure advances at minimum. "I'm not interested in a memoir. My story will be told through fiction, as it always has been." They discussed the practicalities of Bolivia's literary resurrection, rights reversions, contract negotiations, publication timelines. Throughout the conversation, Olivia was struck by how seamlessly she slipped back into this aspect of her former life, as though the intervening years had been merely a lengthy writer's retreat rather than an exile born of violence and betrayal. As they were finishing their coffee, Catherine asked the question Olivia had been expecting. "Have you forgiven her? Your sister?" Olivia gazed out at the harbour, where fishing boats bobbed gently on the afternoon tide. "I'm working on understanding before I attempt forgiveness." Understanding. I've been reading her journal, the one she kept after my disappearance. Olivia turned back to Catherine. "It's a document of grief, guilt, and gradual complicity. She mourned me deeply, then slowly accepted the benefits of my absence, all while hating herself for doing so. Complex emotions. Aren't they always between sisters?" Olivia smiled faintly. "Especially identical twins. Our entire lives people treated us as interchangeable parts of a matched set. Perhaps it was inevitable that the lines between us would blur." After parting from Catherine, Olivia drove to Windward Point, a secluded overlook where she and Eleanor had often come as teenagers to escape their parents' scrutiny. To her surprise, a familiar car was already parked there. Eleanor's SUV, her twin, sat on a weathered bench, wrapped in a cashmere throw, against the autumn chill. She looked up as Olivia approached, unsurprised. "I had a feeling you might come here today," Eleanor said. "After the hearing. How did the prosecutor treat you?" Olivia asked, sitting beside her sister, but maintaining a careful distance. "Like a hostile witness, despite the fact that I'm testifying for their side." Elena's laugh held no humor. "I can't blame them. I'm Maxwell Burke's wife, after all. Soon to be ex-wife, I imagine." Elena nodded. "The divorce papers were filed yesterday. The lawyers advised me to move quickly before the criminal proceedings advance further." They sat in silence for a while, watching seagulls wheel above the churning water far below, the same waters that had supposedly claimed Olivia's life 7 years earlier. "I finished reading your journal," Olivia finally said. Elena tensed visibly, but said nothing. "There was an entry from about a year after my death. You wrote that you woke up screaming from a dream where I was standing at the foot of your bed, of my bed, in my house, watching you sleep beside my husband." Olivia kept her voice neutral. "You wrote that in the dream. I didn't look angry, just sad." I had that dream repeatedly, Elena admitted softly. For years. Was I? Watching you from the foot of the bed? Elena turned to her, startled. What do you mean? Did you sense me? Somehow, my presence, my awareness, because I did think of you both, often. Imagined you in my home, my life, my marriage. I don't believe in ghosts, if that's what you're asking. Neither do I. But I believe in connections, especially between twins. Elena pulled her throat tighter around her shoulders. What happens after the trial, Olivia? When Maxwell is sentenced and all of this becomes just another true crime story for people to gawk at? Olivia considered the question. I go back to writing, to living my life, my real life, under my real name. Here in Shawcliffe? No. Too many ghosts, real or imagined. I've bought a house on the Oregon coast, quiet, isolated, with a view of the ocean that doesn't remind me of anything or anyone. Eleanor nodded, her expression carefully masked. And us? Will there ever be an us? Again, the question hung between them, carried on the salt breeze. Olivia thought of the journal entries she had read, Elena's grief, her guilt, her slow slide into accepting the benefits of Olivia's absence. She thought of the wall of manuscript pages, the careful study of her writing style, the novel completed as an act of, what? Love? Penance? Appropriation? I don't know, Olivia answered honestly, but I do know this. Whatever relationship we might rebuild can never be what it was. We're different people now. You've been living as someone caught between yourself and a version of me. I've been living as someone else entirely. We need to discover who we really are before we can find a way forward together. If that's even possible, Elena murmured. If it's even possible, Olivia agreed. But I'm not closing that door entirely. We shared a womb, Elena. That connection doesn't disappear, even after everything that's happened. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting long golden rays across the water, the sisters sat side by side, not touching, not fully reconciled, but present together in the same moment for the first time in 7 years. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was, perhaps, the beginning of understanding. Winter descended on Shawcliffe with a vengeance that year. Storms lashed the coastline, waves crashed against the seawalls, and wind howled through the carefully manicured streets. The weather seemed fitting for the drama unfolding in the county courthouse, where Maxwell Burke's trial had become the focus of national attention. The case had everything the media craved: wealth, betrayal, attempted murder, and the sensational return of a presumed dead victim. Cable news channels stationed reporters outside the courthouse daily. Legal analysts dissected every motion and ruling, and true crime podcasts dedicated entire series to the Burke betrayal. On the trial's opening day, Olivia arrived early, slipping in through a side entrance arranged by Detective Harlow to avoid the media gauntlet. She wore a charcoal grey suit, professional, understated, the clothing of a woman who wouldn't be. Defined by her victimhood, the prosecution's case was methodical and damning. They established the timeline leading up to Olivia's disappearance, Maxwell's increasing of her life insurance policy, his research into undetectable poisons and investigation procedures, his communication with offshore banking contacts. Financial records showed how quickly he had accessed the insurance payout after Olivia was declared dead, and how those funds had been funneled into properties and investments now held jointly with Elena. On the third day, Olivia took the stand. The courtroom fell silent as she was sworn in, every eye fixed on the woman who had returned from the dead to testify against her would-be murderer. Across the room, Maxwell sat between his attorneys, his expression carefully controlled, though Olivia could see the tension in his jaw, the slight tremor in his hands. "Mrs. Burke," began the prosecutor, a sharp-featured woman named Andrea Reeves, Please tell the court what happened on the night of October 15th, 7 years ago. Olivia's voice remained steady as she recounted discovering the affair, the confrontation with Maxwell and Elena, and her drive toward Crescent Point in the storm. She described spotting Maxwell's car at the lookout, approaching to find him alone, and the argument that ensued when she confronted him about the insurance policy she had discovered while searching for evidence of the affair. He admitted everything, Olivia testified. Not just the affair, but the plan to, as he put it, transition me out of his life. When I threatened to go to the police, he became enraged. There was a struggle near the edge of the outlook. I fell or was pushed down the embankment. "And what happened after you fell?" Reeves asked. "I struck my head on a rock and was briefly unconscious. When I came to, I heard Maxwell above me talking on his phone. He was saying, 'It's done, there was an accident, I'll handle everything.'" Olivia paused. "I realized then that he believed I was dead, or at least badly injured enough, not to pose a threat. I knew if I revealed myself, he would likely finish what had started as a heat-of-the-moment act. So what did you do?" "I dragged myself away, staying low among the rocks. My head was bleeding and I was disoriented, but fear is a powerful motivator. I made it to the coastal road, where a couple from Toronto found me and drove me to St. Mary's Hospital in Westport." "Why didn't you identify yourself at the hospital?" "By the time I was coherent enough to make decisions, a nurse mentioned that police were searching for a woman who had apparently driven off Crescent Point in the storm. I realized Maxwell had staged my accident. I was afraid. If he had tried to kill me once, he would try again if he knew I had survived. So I gave a false name and said I had been mugged while hiking." The defense attorney, a polished man named Lawrence Donovan, attempted to paint Olivia as a vengeful wife who had faked her death to punish her husband for his affair, then constructed an elaborate story of attempted murder to explain her absence. "Isn't it true, Mrs. Burke, that you've built your career creating fictional narratives, psychological thrillers with elaborate plots of deception and revenge?" "I'm a novelist, yes," Olivia responded calmly. "And over these 7 years, you've published 3 more novels under the name Morgan Wells, novels focusing on betrayal, false identities, and elaborate revenge schemes. Isn't this entire story simply your most ambitious work of fiction?" "I published under a pseudonym because I was hiding from a man who had tried to kill me, Mr. Donovan. And writers often explore through fiction the themes that haunt their lives." On the 5th day, Elena took the stand. She appeared fragile but composed, having lost weight since the wedding. She wore a simple navy dress with no jewelry except small pearl earrings, the same ones Olivia had seen in the photos that had ultimately driven her to contact Detective Harlow. Elena testified about her affair with Maxwell, confirming that it had begun approximately 3 months before Olivia's disappearance. She described being sedated the night Olivia vanished, waking to the news that her sister had apparently driven off a cliff in despair. "Did you ever suspect Mr. Burke might have been involved in your sister's death?" asked the prosecutor. Elena's voice wavered slightly. "I didn't want to believe it. Over time, there were moments when things didn't add up. His insistence that we move forward quickly with the funeral arrangements despite no body being found. His eagerness to access the insurance money. But he always had explanations, and She paused, glancing at Olivia. "I think part of me didn't want to question too deeply. I had already betrayed my sister by having an affair with her husband. The possibility that I might also be complicit in her death was too terrible to contemplate. The defense's cross-examination was brutal, suggesting that Eleanor had turned against her husband only to save herself from prosecution. Isn't it convenient, Mrs. Burke, the second Mrs. Burke, that you now claim ignorance of any plans to harm your sister?" That after enjoying the fruits of her insurance policy for 7 years, you suddenly remember moments when things didn't add up. Elena remained steady. There is nothing convenient about any of this, Mr. Donovan. I have lost my sister's trust, my marriage, and any respect I might have had for myself. I am testifying because it's the truth, not because it benefits me in any way. Throughout Elena's testimony, Olivia watched her twin's face, searching for signs of deception or manipulation. She found none, only grief, regret, and a determination to speak the truth regardless of the consequences. As the trial progressed, the evidence mounted. The tourist couple who had found Olivia testified via video link from Canada. Medical records from the Westport Hospital confirmed treatment of a Jane Doe with injuries consistent with Olivia's account. Financial forensics experts detailed the complex money trails Maxwell had established in anticipation of Olivia's death. Most damning was the recording from the restaurant confrontation, where Maxwell had neither denied his actions nor expressed shock at Olivia's survival. Instead, he had immediately attempted to negotiate a settlement, betraying a consciousness of guilt that the jury could not ignore. On the trial's 9th day, as a winter storm battered the courthouse windows, the jury began deliberations. Olivia sat in the empty courtroom during a recess, feeling strangely hollow. For 7 years, the quest for justice had driven her, shaped her decisions, given structure to her days. Now, as that quest neared its conclusion, she found herself contemplating the space it would leave behind. Elena entered quietly, hesitating before approaching. "May I join you?" Olivia nodded, and her twin sat beside her, both women staring at the empty jury box. "Whatever the verdict," Elena said softly, "I want you to know that I'm sorry. Not just for the affair, but for everything that came after. For not questioning more, for not seeing through his lies." "He was very convincing," Olivia replied. "He convinced me too, for years." "What will you do after this is finished?" Olivia considered the question. "Complete my novel, move to Oregon as planned, start again." "Alone?" The word hung in the air between them, layered with meaning beyond its simple syllable. "For now," Olivia said finally, "I need space to rediscover who I am when I'm not hiding, when I'm not consumed by the past." Elena nodded, understanding. "And someday, when you found that person?" Olivia turned to study her twin's face, the face that was both intimately familiar and belonging to a stranger. "Someday, perhaps, we could try to know each other again, as the people we've become, not the people we were." "I'd like that," Elena whispered. Outside, the storm intensified, rain lashing against the windows like nature's own verdict on the human drama unfolding within. But inside, between the sisters, something subtle had shifted. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the first fragile foundation upon which it might someday be built. "Will the defendant please rise?" Maxwell Burke stood beside his attorney, his posture rigid, his expression carefully composed into a mask of dignified concern. After 14 hours of deliberation spread across 2 days, the jury had reached a verdict. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, legal observers, and curious. Locals who had secured coveted seats for the trial's conclusion. In the front row, behind the prosecution table, sat Olivia, with Elena 3 seats away, a deliberate gap between them that symbolized their complicated relationship. On the count of attempted murder in the 1st degree, we, the jury, find the defendant, Maxwell Burke. The foreperson, a retired school teacher with silver-rimmed glasses, paused almost imperceptibly. Guilty. A collective exhale swept through the courtroom. Maxwell remained stone-faced as the foreperson continued. On the count of insurance fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of filing a false police report, we find the defendant guilty. With each pronouncement, Maxwell's façade cracked a little more. By the final count, obstruction of justice, his hands were trembling visibly as they gripped the table before him. Judge Montoya thanked the jury for their service and scheduled sentencing for 3 weeks later. As the bailiff approached to take Maxwell into custody, he finally turned toward Olivia, his composure shattering completely. "This isn't over," he hissed, loud enough for those in the front rows to hear. "You think you've won? You've ruined everything, just like you always did." The bailiff firmly guided him away, but Maxwell's mask had slipped enough for everyone to glimpse the rage and entitlement beneath the polished exterior he had maintained throughout the trial. Outside the courthouse, a light snow had begun to fall, unusual for Shawcliffe in early December. Olivia declined to speak to the press, slipping away through a side exit while Detective Harlow addressed the media on the courthouse steps. "Justice has been served today," he was saying as Olivia passed. "This case demonstrates that no matter how clever the deception, no matter how long it takes, the truth eventually comes to light." Olivia drove to her small rental cottage on the outskirts of town, where she had lived since returning to Shawcliffe. The place was sparsely furnished. She had accumulated few possessions during her years as Morgan Wells, and had purchased only necessities for this temporary home. Most of her belongings were already packed in preparation for her move to Oregon after the sentencing. She had just settled on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the snow drift down over the garden, when a car pulled into the driveway. Elena emerged, carrying a small package wrapped in brown paper. "I hope it's all right that I came," she said, climbing the steps. "I wanted to see you after everything." Olivia gestured to the second chair. "Tea? Please." They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, snow falling around them, blanketing the world in hushed white. Finally, Elena spoke. "I keep thinking about what he said in court, that you ruined everything." She shook her head. "Even now, he doesn't see that he destroyed his own life through his choices. That we all did, in our own ways." "Narcissists rarely accept responsibility," Olivia observed. "In his mind, he's the victim of my survival, of your betrayal by testifying, of an unjust system that punishes his ambition." "I believed him so completely," Elena said softly. "Every explanation, every reassurance, even when things didn't. Makes sense. I chose to trust him rather than question. He was very good at manipulation. We both fell for it, just at different times." Elena looked down at the package in her lap, then held it out to Olivia. "I brought you something. A peace offering, perhaps, or a parting gift. I'm not sure which." Olivia unwrapped the package carefully. Inside was a leather-bound book with no title on the cover. Opening it, she found pages of handwritten text, her handwriting or an eerily perfect imitation, interspersed with Elena's more flowing script. "The Vanishing Hour," Elena explained. "The original manuscript, half yours, half mine. I thought you should have it, now that everyone knows the truth." Olivia ran her fingers over the pages. "What will happen to it? Legally, I mean, now that I'm no longer dead." "The publisher is naturally concerned about the implications. They've suspended further printings until the legal questions can be resolved." Elena hesitated. "I told them that all rights and royalties belong to you, that I make no claim to the work or the income from it. You wrote half of it, based on your outline, your characters, your voice. I was just channeling you, trying to keep you alive in some way." Elena looked out at the snow-covered garden. "I think I lost myself in that process, trying to be you, to replace you, to atone for betraying you. I'm not sure I know who Eleanor is anymore." The admission hung in the air between them, vulnerable and raw. Olivia studied her sister's profile, seeing not just the physical resemblance they shared, but the weight of regret that had become Elena's constant companion. "I struggled with that too," Olivia said finally. Who was Morgan Wells? Who is Olivia Burke now? Somewhere between those identities I had to rediscover myself. And did you find yourself? Olivia considered the question. I'm still looking, but I'm closer now than I was. How did you do it? Elena asked, turning to face her sister. How did you rebuild yourself when everything had been taken away? One word at a time, Olivia replied simply. Writing became my salvation. Even when I couldn't publish under my own name, I could create worlds, characters, resolutions. I could control the narrative in a way I couldn't control my life. Elena nodded slowly. I tried to find that through design, creating physical beauty, when everything else felt ugly and false. She paused. Did you read my journal entries about my clothing line? I did. Phoenix Rising, wasn't it? Yes. Ironic now, considering you're the one who rose from the ashes. Eleanor smiled faintly. The sketches are still in my studio, another dream deferred in the wreckage of all this. They fell silent again, watching as the snow began to accumulate, transforming the familiar landscape into something new and unmarked. I'm leaving next week, Olivia said suddenly. The house in Oregon is ready, and I only need to stay for the sentencing. Elena nodded, unsurprised. Will you write there, as Olivia Burke again? Yes. My agent is already preparing for my literary resurrection. She's positively giddy about the marketing possibilities, though I've insisted on keeping the focus on the work rather than the scandal. You always were more interested in substance than spectacle. Unlike you, Olivia said, but without malice. You always knew how to make an entrance, how to capture attention. Useful skills for a fashion designer, Elena acknowledged. If I ever get back to it. Why wouldn't you? Elena looked surprised by the question. After everything that's happened, the publicity, the scandal, who would want to be associated with me professionally? The fashion industry thrives on scandal, Olivia pointed out, and your talent is genuine. Don't let Maxwell take that from you too. Something shifted in Elena's expression, a flicker of resolve, of possibility. Perhaps you're right. As twilight descended, the sisters continued talking, cautiously at first, then with increasing openness. They spoke of their childhood, of the years apart, of their uncertain futures. They didn't touch on forgiveness directly, both understanding that such things couldn't be rushed or forced. When Elena finally rose to leave, she hesitated at the porch steps. I'm selling the house, our house. I can't live there anymore, surrounded by memories and Maxwell's presence. Where will you go? New York, maybe, or Paris. Somewhere I can start fresh, where no one sees me as just Maxwell Burke's wife or Olivia Burke's twin. Olivia nodded, understanding the need for reinvention all too well. I hope you find what you're looking for. You too, Liv. Eleanor glanced back, snow catching in her dark hair. Perhaps someday, when we've both found ourselves again. She left, the thought unfinished, but Olivia understood. Someday, perhaps, when the wounds had healed and they had each forged new identities from the ruins of the old, they might find their way back to each other, not as the inseparable twins they once were, but as women who had survived betrayal, loss, and transformation. Perhaps, Olivia agreed softly, watching as her sister's car disappeared into the swirling snow, leaving only a single set of tracks that would soon be covered, erased, allowing for a clean slate and a new beginning. 3 weeks later, on a bitter January morning, Maxwell Burke stood before Judge Montoya for sentencing. The courtroom was less crowded than during the trial. The media frenzy had already begun to subside, public attention shifting to newer scandals and sensations. Olivia sat in the same seat she had occupied throughout the proceedings, a composition, notebook open on her lap. She had been taking notes throughout the trial, not for any legal purpose, but as material for her new novel. The psychological complexity of the case, betrayal, denial, self-deception provided rich terrain for her. Fiction. Maxwell had aged visibly during his weeks in county detention. His designer suits had been replaced by standard-issue clothing, his once perfect hair now dull and untrimmed. When offered the opportunity to speak before sentencing, he rose slowly. "Your Honor," he began, his voice lacking its former confidence. "I understand that in the eyes of the court I have been found guilty, but I want the record to show that what happened that night was an accident, a terrible, regrettable accident that spiraled into a series of poor decisions." Olivia watched as he continued his statement, noting how skillfully he avoided actual admission while presenting himself as a victim of circumstance. Even now, facing years in prison, Maxwell remained committed to his narrative of innocence and persecution. Judge Montoya was unmoved. "Mr. Burke, the jury found you guilty of attempted murder, insurance fraud, filing a false police report, and obstruction of justice. These were not accidents or poor decisions, but calculated criminal acts motivated by greed and callous disregard for human life." She sentenced him to 22 years in state prison with the possibility of parole after serving 17 years. As the bailiff led him away, Maxwell didn't look back at Olivia or Elena, who sat several rows behind her sister. Outside the courthouse, a light snow was falling. Olivia stood on the steps, buttoning her coat, when Elena approached. "It's over," Elena said simply. "The legal part, yes." They walked in silence to the small park across from the courthouse, finding a sheltered bench beneath barren oak trees. For several minutes, they sat watching their breath form clouds in the cold air. "I'm leaving tomorrow," Olivia said finally. "Everything's packed and ready for the movers." Elena nodded. "I've accepted a position with a design house in Milan. I start next month." "Milan? That's quite a change from Shorecliff." "That's the point." Elena smiled faintly. "No one there knows me as Maxwell Burke's wife or Olivia Burke's twin. I can be just Elena. Is that what you want? To be just Elena?" Elena considered the question. "For now, yes. I need to discover who that is." Above them, the oak branches creaked in the winter wind, snow drifting down through skeletal limbs. Olivia thought about identity. How hers had been stolen, then reconstructed. How Elena had tried to assume aspects of it. How both of them now sought to define themselves apart from their shared history. "I've been thinking about The Vanishing Hour," Olivia said suddenly. "The novel you finished after my disappearance. What about it? I'd like to republish it with dual attribution. By Olivia Burke and Elena Voss." Elena looked genuinely surprised. "After everything that happened, you'd share credit with me?" "You wrote half of it. Beautifully, I might add. I've reread it several times now, and the transition between our sections is nearly seamless." Olivia turned to face her sister. "It might be the only truly collaborative thing we'll ever create." "I don't know what to say," Elena whispered. "Thank you doesn't seem adequate. It's not about gratitude. It's about acknowledging truth, that the book exists because of both of us, that despite everything, there was something valuable in our connection." They lapsed into silence again, but it felt different now, less charged with unresolved emotions, more open to possibility. "I want to show you something," Olivia said, reaching into her bag. She pulled out a slim manuscript bound with a simple clip. "The first 3 chapters of my new novel." Elena accepted it carefully. "You trust me to read this?" "I do." The manuscript was titled Mirror Images, and the opening paragraph described identical twin sisters standing on either side of a chasm, one who had fallen and climbed back up, one who had remained on the edge, watching and waiting. "It's not about us," Olivia clarified as Eleanor scanned the first page. "Not literally, but it explores themes of identity, of twinship, of the blurring between self and other." The protagonist discovers that her twin has been impersonating her while she was in a coma. When she awakens, she has to reclaim her life while coming to terms with her sister's betrayal and the fact that, in some ways, her twin lived her life better than she had. Fiction as therapy? Elena asked gently. Fiction as exploration, Olivia corrected. I'm not interested in settling scores or assigning blame. I want to understand how we become who we are, how identity can be both immutable and fluid. Elena closed the manuscript. I'd like to read it when it's finished. I'll send it to you in Milan. In the distance, the courthouse clock struck noon. Olivia had a flight to catch in the morning, last-minute details to attend to before leaving Shawcliffe behind. Elena had her own preparations for departure. Their time together was drawing to a close. There's something I need to ask you, Elena said as they rose from the bench. Something I've wondered since you returned. What is it? During those 7 years, did you ever think about contacting me? Not to expose Maxwell, but just to let me know you were alive. The question caught Olivia off guard. She considered it carefully before answering. I thought about it constantly. In the beginning, I would pick up the phone, then put it down. I would draft emails, then delete them. She brushed snow from her coat. But as time passed, it became harder to imagine how to bridge that gap. How to say, hello, sister, I'm not dead, but I've been watching you live the life you built on the foundation of my disappearance. I would have left him immediately if I had known the truth, Elena said quietly. Would you have believed me? If I had contacted you with an incredible story about Maxwell attempting to kill me, with no proof except my word. Elena didn't answer immediately. I don't know, she finally admitted. I was so in love with him, or thought I was. I might have convinced myself you were lying out of jealousy or mental instability, Olivia nodded, appreciating her sister's honesty. That's why I waited, why I gathered evidence first. I needed more than my word against his. They walked slowly through the park, following paths partially cleared of snow, heading toward their separate cars. At the park's edge, they paused, both reluctant to bring this meeting to its inevitable conclusion. Will you be all right? Elena asked suddenly. Alone in Oregon? I won't be alone for long, Olivia smiled. Catherine is already arranging a book tour for my official Return from the Dead, and my new editor is eager to work with me on mirror images. That's not what I meant. I know. Olivia's expression softened. Yes, I'll be all right. Better than all right. For the first time in 7 years, I can use my real name, live openly, write without fear of discovery. It's a kind of freedom I had forgotten was possible. And us? Elena asked, echoing a question she had posed before. Will we ever find our way back to each other? Olivia reached out and, for the first time since her return, took her sister's hand. The contact was brief but significant, a small breach in the wall that had stood between them. I think we already have in some ways, she said. The rest will take time. They parted with no dramatic declarations of forgiveness or reconciliation, no promises beyond staying in touch. Such gestures would have felt forced, premature. Instead, they exchanged simple goodbyes, acknowledging that this ending was also a beginning, for each of them individually, and perhaps, someday, for the bond they had once shared. As Olivia drove away, she glanced in her rearview mirror at Elena's diminishing figure standing in the gently falling snow. For 7 years, she had defined herself in opposition to her twin, the betrayed to Elena's betrayer, the displaced to Elena's usurper. Now, they would both have the chance to define themselves on their own terms, separate yet forever connected by blood, history, and the complex love that remained, despite everything that had transpired between them. Tomorrow, she would board a plane to Oregon, to her new home overlooking a different ocean, to a future where Olivia Burke would write again, live again, perhaps even love again. not as a ghost or a pseudonym, but as herself, finally and completely free. The Oregon coast. In February was a world away from Shorecliff's manicured shorelines. Wild and untamed, the Pacific crashed against jagged rock formations, sending spray high into the air, before retreating into its depths, only to surge forward again in an eternal rhythm that Olivia found hypnotic. Her new home perched on a cliff, overlooking Agate Cove, a modern structure of glass, cedar and stone that seemed to grow organically from the landscape. The previous owner, an architect who had designed the house for himself, had created spaces that captured the dramatic seascape while providing shelter from the elements, window seats positioned for storm watching, a covered deck for enjoying misty mornings, a writing studio with 3 walls of glass that made Olivia feel as though she was suspended above the ocean. 6 weeks after leaving Shorecliff, she had settled into a routine that centered around this studio. She rose early, walking the rugged beach at dawn, collecting sea-polished stones and driftwood, then coffee on the deck, watching the ever-changing sky. By 8, she was at her desk, working on Mirror Images, the novel that had emerged from the crucible of her ordeal. The manuscript had taken on a life of its own, evolving beyond its initial premise. What had begun as an exploration of identity and betrayal between twins had deepened into a more nuanced examination of how trauma reshapes the self, how we construct protective personas to survive, and the courage required to integrate these fractured aspects of identity. On this particular morning, as rain lashed against the windows and wind howled around the eaves, Olivia reached a crucial scene, the confrontation between the twin sisters after the protagonist's awakening from her coma. She had struggled with this scene for days, writing and rewriting dialogue that felt alternatively too bitter or too forgiving, neither capturing the complex emotional reality she sought to express. Her phone chimed with an incoming message. It was from Elena, arrived in Milan yesterday. The city is beautiful and overwhelming, starting at the design house tomorrow. Nervous and excited. Attached was a photo of Elena on a balcony overlooking the Duomo, the cathedral's Gothic spires rising behind her. She looked different somehow, her hair styled in a pixie cut that distinguished her from Olivia's longer locks, her clothing artistic rather than elegant, her smile tentative but genuine. "You look happy," Olivia texted back. "The new hairstyle suits you. A physical manifestation of internal changes," Elena replied. "How's the writing coming? Challenging today?" Working on the confrontation scene between the sisters. There was a pause before Eleanor's response appeared. "What's the hardest part?" Olivia considered the question. Finding the balance. Real people don't speak in perfectly crafted speeches about betrayal and forgiveness. But readers expect a certain narrative satisfaction from such scenes. What do your sisters say to each other? I'm not sure yet. That's the problem. Another pause, longer this time. Then, maybe they don't need to say everything. Some things can't be articulated, only felt. Olivia stared at the message, something clicking into place. She had been approaching the scene as a resolution, when perhaps it should be an opening. Not an end to the sisters' conflict, but the beginning of a longer, more complex conversation about who they were to each other now. "Thank you," she wrote back. "That helps. Glad to be useful, even from across an ocean." Olivia returned to her manuscript with fresh insight, rewriting the confrontation as a series of halting, imperfect exchanges rather than a dramatic showdown. The protagonist and her twin circled each other warily, each revelation leading not to catharsis, but to new questions, new complexities. It felt true, in a way her previous attempts hadn't. Messy, unresolved, human. Hours later, satisfied with the scene, Olivia descended from her studio to find the storm had intensified. Waves crashed against the shore with thunderous force, and The lights flickered ominously. Anticipating a power outage, she gathered candles, filled several containers with water, and checked that her emergency supplies were accessible. As darkness fell, the predicted outage occurred. Olivia moved through, the house lighting candles, the storm's fury creating a cocoon of isolation around her. In the soft, flickering light, she felt a curious sense of peace, alone, but not lonely, separated from the world, but connected to something larger than herself. She thought of Maxwell, now beginning his long sentence in state prison, of Elena, starting a new life in Milan, of the identities they had all assumed and discarded, of the stories they had told themselves and each other. Her phone rang, startling her. The caller ID showed Catherine Winters, her literary agent. "I hope I'm not calling too late," Catherine began. "Not at all. I'm just sitting here by candlelight during a power outage, feeling appropriately writerly." Catherine laughed. "Perfect. I've got news that couldn't wait. Simon & Schuster has made an offer for mirror images based on the chapters and outline you provided. 7 figures, Olivia. They're positioning it as the literary comeback of the decade." Olivia absorbed this information silently. The advance was substantial, life-changing, but it was the validation of her work that affected her most deeply. "There's more," Catherine continued. "They're also interested in republishing your backlist, including the joint attribution we discussed for The Vanishing Hour, and they're proposing a 2-book deal with a memoir to follow mirror images." "I've told you I'm not interested in writing a memoir," Olivia said immediately. I know, but they're very keen, and the additional advance would be substantial." "No memoir," Olivia said firmly. "I'll process my experiences through fiction, not autobiography. But the rest sounds promising. Send me the details and I'll review them tomorrow." After they hung up, Olivia stood by the window watching lightning illuminate the churning ocean. The storm outside mirrored the one that had changed her life 7 years earlier, but this time she was not fleeing in fear. She was standing her ground, watching from a place of strength, of safety. Her phone chimed again. Another text from Eleanor. "Strange request, but would you mind sending me a photo of the view from your house? Want to imagine where you are?" Olivia smiled and replied, "Power's out due to storm. Can't see much except darkness and occasional lightning. We'll send when it's visible again." "Storms there too? We're having one in Milan as well. Different continent, same weather. Twins again despite everything," Olivia responded. The phrase lingered in her mind after she set the phone down. Twins again despite everything, despite betrayal. Despite 7 years of separation, despite all the ways they had hurt and been hurt by each other, some connection remained. Not the same as before. They would never again be the inseparable, interchangeable girls of their youth, but something resilient nonetheless. A memory surfaced. Elena, at 5 years old, holding Olivia's hand as they entered kindergarten together. "Don't be scared," Elena had whispered, though she was the one trembling. "We're twice as brave when we're together." Olivia had never included that memory in her journal, had never shared it during therapy sessions after her death. It had been too painful to recall the Elena who had loved her unconditionally, who had been her first and fiercest protector. Now, sitting in the storm-lashed house on Agate Cove, she allowed herself to hold both versions of her sister in mind. The woman who had betrayed her, and the girl who had loved her. The truth of Elena, of their relationship, encompassed both realities. Olivia opened her laptop again, inspiration striking. She began a new chapter of her novel, one she hadn't planned, in which the protagonist discovers an old memory of her twin that complicates her anger, that reminds her of the love that had existed before the betrayal. As she wrote, the storm gradually subsided, its fury spent. The house creaked and settled in the aftermath, and the power flickered back to life. Olivia saved her work and went to the window. The clouds were breaking up, revealing a sky brilliant with stars, and the ocean below had calmed to gentle swells that reflected the moonlight. She took a photo of this serene aftermath and sent it to Eleanor with a simple message. "After the storm, my new beginning." The response came quickly. "Beautiful. Worthy of you." In that exchange, brief as it was, Olivia felt something shift slightly between them, not forgiveness exactly, but a willingness to see beyond the damage, to acknowledge the beauty that remained possible in each of their lives, separately and perhaps someday together. She returned to her writing with renewed purpose, no longer struggling to find the right words for her fictional sisters. They would speak as she and Elena were learning to speak, honestly but carefully, acknowledging the past without allowing it to dictate the future, finding their way towards something new, something true. September arrived with a crispness too. The air and the first hints of autumn color touching the deciduous trees scattered among the evergreens on the Oregon coastline. Mirror images had been published to critical acclaim and strong sales, with reviewers praising its psychological depth and nuanced exploration of identity. Literary journals hosted discussions about the novel's themes, carefully navigating the parallels to Olivia's real experiences without reducing the work to mere autobiography. On the final stop of her book tour, Olivia returned to Shawcliffe for a reading at the town's independent bookstore. The event had sold out within hours of being announced, attendees drawn by both literary interest and inevitable curiosity about the woman who had returned from the dead. As she approached the podium, Olivia surveyed the packed room. Familiar faces from her previous life mingled with strangers, all watching her with rapt attention. In the front row sat Detective Harlow, who had become an unexpected friend and occasional dinner companion when his work brought him to the coast. Beside him was Catherine, beaming with pride at her client's successful return to the literary world, and at the very back, partially obscured by a bookshelf, but unmistakable to Olivia's eye, stood Elena. They had maintained their cautious communication over the months, texts, occasional calls, photos shared of their separate lives, but they hadn't seen each other since parting in the snow-covered park after Maxwell's sentencing. Elena hadn't mentioned coming to the reading, and her presence sent a small shock of recognition through Olivia. "Thank you all for coming," Olivia began, centering herself at the podium. "It feels appropriate to conclude this tour here in Shawcliffe, where my story, both the real one and the fictional one I've created, has its roots." She read a passage from the novel, the scene where the twin sisters finally confront each other after years of separation. The audience listened in complete silence, the tension in the room palpable as the fictional siblings navigated their complex emotions. When the reading ended and applause filled the room, Olivia found her gaze drawn to the back where Eleanor stood, applauding with tears streaming down her face. Their eyes met across the crowded space, a moment of perfect recognition between two women who had once been mirror images of each other and were now distinct individuals, shaped by separate experiences, yet connected by an unbreakable bond. In that silent exchange was neither perfect forgiveness nor complete healing, but something perhaps more valuable: acknowledgement of all they had been to each other, the harm done, and the love that persisted despite it, and a willingness to see what might still be possible.